You use Sobsczyk at Boddington.
Yeah.
Sobsczyk. Is that kind of, that'll do? Or is that...
Yes, do that. So, long story is I took my wife's surname, which is Boddington, so Sobczyk's my middle name, Sobsczyk was my previous name, and known as I am.
No, that's fine. It was the pronunciation of Sobsczyk.
Well, you nailed it in Polish.
Sobsczyk and Vasiloiu. I have a friend who's a Vasiloiu, so it makes life easier.
I've never actually heard of anyone else.
Vasiloiu.
I think, there's some weird pronunciation of it in actual Greek or something, but like Vasiloiu.
Oh.
But I don't know.
I've got a Dulu, Asa. It's my child.
I get you in water.
I think you're okay.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Is that your?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Can we take these up?
Yeah, you're all going to speak from...
Probably.
They want us all to speak.
Oh, yes, they do. So we're going back. We're already over. We're already starting late.
Well, it's always about the lunchtime, isn't it? I don't know what the split's going to be between the two sessions. It looks like there's a decent version.
There's some good research on where people sit in the next room if you come in. Basically, it's like gaming. The patterns are really obvious. If that person sits there, the probability that the next person will sit here is pretty high.
Membership body for companies that make projects, and I'm going to kick off, I think. Yes. Hello! I can say hello just as John enters the room, which is what he did to me when I entered the room early this morning, late. So I have to apologise for that. I'm hoping that we're all now here. We've probably got a few stragglers coming in from lunch. I am Manon Bradley. I'm the Development Director of the Major Projects Association. And in the Major Projects Association, we say that a project that starts badly rarely recovers. So I'm really keen for us to get back on track because we're already late. But I blame Mark Reynolds for that. I think, is he in the room? No, I can get away with that then, can't I? So do come and sit at the front. We're trying to encourage people to move closer. Come on. All right, come on in. Excellent. Right, thank you everybody. I hope you had a lovely lunch. As I said, I'm Manon Bradley, Development Director of the Major Projects Association. Bryony Wickenden, who's put together a lot of today, sort of asked me at the last minute to come and step in. And I shall repay the favour to her at some point in the future. So we've got a really good panel for the next hour or so, just under an hour, talking about how do we inspire the next generation. We had great presentations from Lauren and Tolu earlier, sort of representing that next generation. How do we ensure that we keep that diversity going within the next generation? So we've got three great panellists. I'm going to do a brief introduction of them, and then they're going to come up and give a sort of a 10-minute provocation about what they think the answer is. So we've got Johnny Sobsczyk Boddington. I got it right earlier, didn't I? Who's the Chief Exec of the Peter Jones Foundation, appointed in 2017. But former classroom teacher, so Johnny is passionate about enterprise and education and is committed to improving the life choices and the life chances of young people that we work with. We then have Adam Brown, Senior Business Development and Corporate Partnership Manager of MyKindaFuture. Adam's been heavily involved in working with employers like Skanska and Arcadis to help them develop and deploy digital capabilities designed to engage and support diverse talent. We also have Theodore Vasiloiu, who I've just learned is a highly successful sixth form student, interested in biomedical engineering and published in the area of neurosurgery. So we don't have a biography for Theo, but I'm sure he will explain a little bit more about that. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Johnny to come up and give your thoughts.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Johnny, and I run an organisation called the Peter Jones Foundation. Some of you may be familiar with my boss. He's the big tall one on Dragon's Den, and I think he's quite scary, but fortunately I'm his soft underbelly. I get to do all of the nice philanthropic work, which mostly involves lending money to children to get them to start their first business. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and how we try and... Actually, that whole programme is about increasing access to enterprise. Enterprise is not just for entrepreneurs. Enterprise could be for everyone. If we're all more enterprising, we believe the nation will be a healthier place. And we want everybody to think about business. We want people on very vocational courses not to think about going into that vocation, but going into setting up a business in that space. But I think I was invited here today because before that, so it was a classroom teacher, but after that experience, I set up what has now become the UK's largest highly selective university access programme. So going out across the country, trying to find top academic talent and trying to get them to apply to study at university and at highly selective university. So talk a little bit about that and how we modelled that. I was quite often through that experience, we use the analogy of the football industry and how they recruit talent. So some reflections on that too. And really here is much to learn as well. I'm really interested in other sectors and other industries and really open to questions. And if there is anything that you can take from the work that we've done in university access and more recently enterprise education. This is my CV behind me. So I left university and joined a graduate recruitment programme called Teach First. Teach First places graduates into schools serving typically low-income communities, and you sort of get thrown in at the deep end. You're teaching pretty much full-time, but you get your qualification alongside of that with a lot of gold dust sprinkled all over it, a lot of corporate sponsors, and trying to get top talent to think about a career in the non-selective state school system. Off the back of that, I'm from a humanities background. All the things I loved at school were young enterprise, debating societies, humanities. I studied philosophy, politics and economics at university. And I was given the remit of Gift and Talented Coordinator. I don't know if any of you have heard that term before, but I had the nice acronym G&T Co at the end of my email address for a while. But what I had to do was challenge the students who were doing well academically, continue to provide programs that would stretch them. And I got told off for just doing the things that I enjoyed, and my head teacher said, you've got to do something in science. I don't know anything about science. I wasn't particularly passionate about science, but I was really lucky in that my sister was studying for a PhD in neuroscience at the time at the University of Oxford. So I borrowed her, I stuck her into my school in Tower Hamlets, and she delivered Oxbridge-style tutorials to a group of 14-year-old lads from Tower Hamlets. And at the end of that programme, they had to write a 2,000-word essay exactly like they would if they were an undergraduate on one of the courses she was teaching. And it just worked really, really well, and it snowballed from there, really. And fast forward 10 years, like I say, it's now the UK's largest university access charity. We employ about 1,000 doctoral researchers who go out into school and tutor about 10,000 students up and down the UK, actually in South Africa and the States now too. So a really exciting programme, but it just worked. And I had the idea, but actually I think a lot of the success was the team that we got on board early on and the talent we got into our own organisation. Off the back of that, I set up another organisation called Researchers in Schools, which was all about getting people to think about a career, people from academic backgrounds to think about a career in the classroom. So they go and train and work as full-time teachers. So did a big graduate recruitment exercise. We were recruiting about 150 trainee teachers every year, still do. And more recently set up an organisation called Impact Head. Huge amount of research in the education system. Most parts of the economy. I think there's a huge amount of research going on in universities, but no practitioners in the classroom were using a lot of the evidence base. So it was all about trying to make the evidence base accessible and put it in the hands of teachers. So Impact Ed's a digital platform. And about 3 years ago, I got approached for the role that I now currently have at Peter Jones Foundation, which, as I said at the start, is all about developing enterprise skills in young school children up and down the UK. Peter is someone who I hope he wouldn't mind me saying, feels he's successful despite his education. He thinks school didn't set him up for the real world at all. He thinks he learned most of his lessons, most of his business lessons at the age of 28, 29, 30 when he lost his first business and had to move back in with his parents. So the foundation, and it's a real privilege to work with him and run it, the foundation is all about giving kids the opportunity to explore business in a safe, controlled environment, develop those business skills, go through a complete business cycle. So we lend them up to £2,000. They have to start a business. They trade for up to 16 weeks, and then they have to close the business and see if they can make a profit in that time period. The programme goes on, so we start at primary schools, and it gets tougher and tougher all the way up to 18. And we've just launched a higher education programme as well. But that's what I've been up to, and that's what I do in the world of education. And three reflections, really, when you're thinking about those comments at the top there. So promoting diversity, exciting the next generation, and enhancing lives. And I think working in education, being a classroom teacher, it's a real privilege that that's something I get to try and do every day, not always successfully. But three reflections on these different organisations and some of the things we've learned, I suppose, relating to that and relating to this session about inspiring the next generation. So the first thing is you can change things. You can change things pretty quickly and build really, really strong talent pipelines into organisations. As I said before, an analogy we quite often use at the Brilliant Club was, well, what would a football club do? What would a professional football club do? We talk to employers all the time, and people talk a lot about this skills gap. Oh, well, schools don't prepare kids for the real world jobs. And absolutely, as a former classroom teacher, you are acutely aware of that. You want to be thinking about giving skills to kids that will make them successful throughout their whole life. But I think employers have got to work with schools and meet them in the middle. And a really good example of that is if you look at professional football academies, they don't wait until a kid gets to 16 or 18 and then just hope that he's ready and he's going to walk into their dressing room and be able to play Premiership level football. They will go out and they are scouting kids. You know, they've got 4, 5, 6-year-olds who they're looking at and trying to work out if they've got talent. Massive, massive operations. I'm fairly confident they'd be paying primary school children if they could. And if they were allowed to. And it's all about working with schools, working with the practitioners to get those kids ready, to get them into the physical condition. And we try and think about that at the Brilliant Club is, okay, well, if we want kids from poor backgrounds to apply to highly selective universities in equal measure to kids from rich backgrounds, we've got to go out to primary schools. We've got to start working with 6, 7, 8-year-olds and start building those pipelines and building that progression. Because the truth is the schools are stretched. Schools across the UK are stretched, and they're not going to do it on their own. So really thinking about how you can work with the school system to develop that talent pipeline. And then the second one here is thinking about really successful organisations that have done it, or one in particular, the route that I trained into the classroom, and how quickly they flipped something. So I trained, as I said, through this organisation called Teach First. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. A lot of people in this country are hung up on Oxford or Cambridge, and it is a marker of graduate talent. If a big city law firm has a high percentage of its intake from Oxford or Cambridge, they think that those universities have done the screening for them, and those candidates will be of a high calibre. Those candidates will also have better grades and probably perform better in aptitude tests and so on. And well, let's say 15 years ago now. I think Teach First is 17 years ago. So let's say 20 years ago. People who went to Oxford or Cambridge did not go and train to teach in failing schools. A couple did, but it wasn't a route. If you went to Oxford or Cambridge and you wanted to become a teacher, you'd probably go to a top private school. Within a 10-year period, this guy called Brett started a charity called Teach First. And fast forward 10 years, the job that more Oxford or Cambridge graduates applied to than any other position was to go and teach in a failing school in London, Manchester or Birmingham. And the way they did it is they made that proposition seem really sexy, seem really exciting. They told those graduates that they were outstanding, they were the best of the best. It's the biggest graduate employer now. I think PwC and Teach First sort of go up and down, but it employs about 2,000 people every year. And not all of those people can be the best of the best or outstanding, but it showers praise on them and tells them that they're brilliant. perhaps brilliant graduates. What I learned when I got into school actually was that I was a pretty rubbish teacher to begin with, and you certainly get chucked in at the deep end and learn on your feet, and it is a bit of a sink or swim, but amazing success. You know, they were getting at one stage about 8,000 young people applying to that one organisation from universities across the UK, and that was a flip. It went from being nothing to the biggest graduate employer in about a 10-year period, in a sector that people for years had thought was failing, frankly, and couldn't get good talent. So how did they do that flip? How did they turn it on its head? And like I say, about celebrating the talent, not making them feel like it was a judgmental process. And we thought about that with researchers in schools as well, the second organisation that I set up. And it was all about making a pathway feel special. So researchers in schools, teacher training programme for doctoral graduates, they do exactly the same training as any other teacher trainer, but we built in some bits that made it feel special to them. They had a link with a university, they could carry on their own research. They had a university ambassador role within the school. And with a little bit of window dressing and some substance, we made this route feel very bespoke, very niche, and tried to use it as a bit of a beacon to get that top talent. So my second reflection is about managing to outcomes, not outputs. So it's not just about the numbers. It's not just about the numbers of people that you interview or the numbers of people that you get into your organisation or you get onto your inspirational programmes. It has to be about what was the outcome of that interaction. So 2 points really with this one. The first is that if you are running any kind of outreach and you're trying to go into schools to promote your own company or promote the sector more broadly that you work in, really think about where the issues are. Look at the data. So a lot of people would think university access is all about equality of access. So a lot of university access programs historically focused on BAME communities. But actually, if you look at the data, the least represented group of their as a percentage of their population is white males. Every other ethnic group is overrepresented at university, and white men are underrepresented at university. A lot of rural and coastal white working class communities. So actually, a lot of our programs, we had to stop focusing in areas that traditionally people had focused outreach in. We were talking about it earlier, East London, and move a lot of our operations to places like East Anglia or the South Coast. Researchers in schools, that was all set up because we realised that only 1 in 4 children, only 1 in 4 children was getting taught physics by someone who had studied physics beyond school. Most children in this country are taught physics by someone who wasn't passionate about physics, and it has ended up on their desk because that pipeline isn't there. So that was what Researchers in Schools was all about, getting physics teachers into the classroom. And at Peter Jones Foundation, there's a real gender issue in enterprise education. We run a huge competition. It's free for all secondary schools. We support about 3,500 kids every year to start a business. Really proud that 50% of those students are boys and 50% are girls. But at our top level, our skyscraper programme, National Entrepreneur of the Year, where they can go and pitch to Peter Jones for £5,000, 90% of our applicants are boys and only 10% are girls. So we're really trying to think what's gone wrong between that 14-year-old who wants to get involved in enterprise and that 17-year-old girl who doesn't want to say, well, I'm the best young entrepreneur in this country. Second point here, don't presume your ideas are any good. So I'll use a brief example here. But a lot of people do outreach in schools and just presume that it's good. A lot of people presume charities do good. You give your money to someone on the street and you think they make use of that. There's a huge programme in the States to stop, actually there's a TV programme on at the moment, bizarrely doing the same thing. They would take kids who are at risk of exclusion from school and gang membership, take them into prisons, and they would meet young people who had gone through that process, joined a gang and ended up in prison and were now a reformed criminal and would say it's not worth it, don't do it. Millions and millions of dollars went into this, hundreds and thousands of man-hours went into this. There's still a few states that run this programme, and all of the data, several randomised controlled trials showed that statistically, for whatever reason, maybe exposure, but those kids are more likely to end up in prison. So you've got to do your research, you've got to keep testing your premises. The worst thing in the world would be if you go out and you're trying to run a programme to inspire the next generation and getting them to apply to work in your industry, and actually you're doing the exact opposite. And this happens all the time. People sending wrong people into schools or ill-equipped people into schools or not training them or not codifying their programmes. So keep measuring stuff, any kind of access or outreach work, anything to do with inspiring the next generation. The data's all there, just make sure you're collecting it and testing it and trying to prove that your idea is a good one, as opposed to just hoping it's a good one and running it through your charity or your foundation and presuming that all charitable work is good, because it's not. In the UK, there's loads of examples of charitable school programmes that probably do nothing, maybe have harmful impact on kids. So there is a huge risk with working with young people as well. The third and final reflection. So why does this matter? So Brilliant Club I started with actually my flatmate at the time. We were living in Bethnal Green, and we ran it together, but for different reasons, but they were compatible, and that was okay. But why does it matter to you? Why do you care about trying to inspire the next generation and getting more diversity into your sector? For Simon, he went to university and loved it, and he wanted to, his mum was an academic, and he genuinely loved the academic challenge. For me, university was only really a stepping stone, and I thought, if you want a good job, you've probably got to go to university, not necessarily. So for me, it was always, like I said, a stepping stone in my career. And I had a good time as well. So of course I wanted my kids to have a good time. And it's really weird now working in enterprise sector, because we tell loads of kids don't go to university, or at least think about going to university, because it's definitely not for everybody. And there are lots of really credible alternatives that we need to really raise the status of in the UK. I think a target of 50% of young people going to university was probably unhelpful. But at the Brilliant Club, it was all about equality. So it was all about, well, actually, poor children don't go in anything like the numbers that rich children go. So that was the bit we were playing around with. And like I say, for Simon, it was all about equality of opportunity to do that job. Shouldn't matter if you're black or white, shouldn't matter if you're poor or rich, shouldn't matter if you're male or female. If there's a chance that you're going to really be inspired by being pushed and prodded and probed by an academic and having to think through really tough academic challenges, then you should have an equal opportunity to get to university. Like I say, for me, it was always a bit different. And actually, it probably more than anything comes down to the wasted potential. And this is the argument that I'd make to you guys thinking about inspiring the next generation into the sectors that you work in. So this is me dressed as a duck. I'm about to do the Bath half for charity. And this was the issue. This was the access issue in university. It's pretty much the same now, but 10 years ago when I started working in university access. So I was really lucky. I went to my local independent school where my mum was a teacher. And I thought I did quite well in my A-levels, thought I did quite well and went on to a decent university. But actually I really didn't when you look at the stats. So this is me, representative of my cohort of private school kids. 25 me's go off to highly selective universities. 23 me's go off to other universities across the UK. And just 2 of me's don't go on to university at all. Compare that to Simon, my colleague who I started the Brilliant Club with. He just went to his local state school. And he did a bit better. So 10 Simons go on to highly selective universities. 10 Simons go off to other universities across the UK. And 30 Simons don't go on to university at all. And then compare that to Mohammed. Mohammed was in our first ever cohort. Really proud of him. He went to university and now he's a teacher in North London. But he was the only kid. So Mohammed is a Free School Meals background child. So he has at the time had a household income of less than £16,500. He is the only child in his peer group of Free School Meals children who goes on to a highly selective university. 8 of his friends go off to other universities and 41 Mohammeds don't make it. And for me, that's a problem because like it or lump it are some of our leading industries, most of our political system, all of the big professions like law and finance, they're recruiting from these top 20 or 30 universities on a daily basis. And they're getting these guys, they're getting the me's. And I think about this just represents 7% of the population, by the way, who go to private school. And think of all of that wasted talent out there. Think about what some of these kids could do in university, in academia. Is the kid who cures cancer going to be in this group and miss the chance? And thinking about your own industry, I'd say that same challenge. All that talent that is out there in the UK, are we building bridges? Are we working like Premier League football clubs to go out and get it? Because it's there. If you work in law, it's a really tricky one because a lot of your graduate talent is all focused in the southeast and in London. But if you are recruiting from schools, you are very lucky because that talent is pretty much equally distributed across 3,500 secondary schools up and down the United Kingdom. So I would really encourage you to think about how you can build those pathways and inspire the next generation, because if we don't, there will be a whole dearth of wasted talent out there. I've got absolutely no idea if I'm on time or over time, but those are the end of my slides. Really happy to take questions, and I'm around afterwards. And the final thing I'll say is there's my email address, Johnny@PJ Foundation. If any of you have any interest, going back to my day job now, about inspiring the next generation to develop business skills, working with some of our young entrepreneurs, mentoring, so on and so forth, please do drop me an email, and we'd love to talk to you more about our enterprise programmes. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Johnny. We are running over a little bit, so I'm going to ask Adam to step straight up. We'll take questions for everybody at the end of the session.
Good afternoon. Just a very quick story about last time I delivered this session. Bit of a last-minute addition to the agenda, and my opening comment was about the lunch voucher that we've been given for lunch, and the room went very quiet, and there was just murmuring. You could literally hear a pin drop, and my colleague came up and said, "That was just for the speakers." It was a very awkward double gin and tonic, please, moment, but pleasure to be here today. So today what I'm going to do is focus on a couple of key attributes within what we do at MyKindaFuture. And I think the important thing to say is that our responsibility really is to try and level the playing field for young people. And there's a couple of ways that we do that. One is through a network of around about 6,500 schools and colleges around the UK, which we encourage and link employers in with directly. And the second proposition is around digital, and it's a really interesting space, I think, to be able to combine those to support and inspire the next generation. So just in terms of a little bit of context around the early careers space, from both a young person's perspective and an employer's perspective, there is certainly more competition for talent. So there's around about a 17% growth in graduate vacancies and about a 47% growth in graduate vacancies. So more employers are looking to recruit early talent. We're also seeing that diversity is still a key driver for employers who recruit in the emerging talent space. So the Institute of Student Employers, who are a membership organisation of the largest early careers recruiters in the UK, every year they issue a survey, and I think for the second or third year running, diversity has been a key driver for them. So not in terms of just addressing an ageing workforce, but also in terms of bringing diverse talent and creating more diversity of thought within business. A strong candidate experience is really, really essential, and I think this is something that we're definitely seeing as a growing trend. I think for a young person with a breadth of opportunities, sometimes, accurately or otherwise, it's challenging for them to be able to identify which is the right opportunity and organisation to work for. And sometimes the only differentiator is actually how you engage and support that talent through the process. And finally, I think it's clear to see that employers are being asked to do more with less in the emerging talent space. So whereas historically they were just looking after perhaps graduate programmes or apprenticeship programmes, they're now perhaps responsible for graduates, apprentices, work experience, degree apprenticeship programmes, T-level pathways, whatever it might be. So the capacity is growing, but that's not necessarily reflected in terms of the numbers that we're seeing within early talent teams. So the way that we engage with young people is certainly changing, and why I've put here in part is because within our network of young people, we know that actually face-to-face engagement is really critical. Face-to-face engagement is how you really dispel myths and start to create that talent pipeline. But the way and the time at which we engage with young people certainly is changing, and digital is playing a key role within that. So just to give you an example of what I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, if you were perhaps a graduate recruiter, it may have been the case that you only really engaged with your talent once they landed in day one. Whereas now actually what we're seeing is a huge appetite for knowledge and information among young people prior to day one. They really want to hit the ground running, they want to make a great impression, they're hungry for knowledge, and so it's critical that we supply them with that support and that information prior to day one. And actually, if they don't have that, if you're not engaging with young people in a way that they're accustomed to, and they don't feel that they're brought into the opportunity, then they will look elsewhere. So a recent report by Olio, who are a big IT and ATS provider, suggests that it's in the region of 1 in 5 candidates may drop out if they don't feel that they've created a bond and a lasting relationship with their prospective employer. quick straw poll, 74% of smartphone users turn to their devices while completing tasks. So if you think that's true, stick your hand up. Oh, it's actually 90% plus based on a Google report from 2017, so perhaps it's actually even higher now. So if I think about, again, my own experiences, I will be Googling after this session how to get soy sauce out of a shirt, but lunch was delicious briny, so thank you ever so much. So how is technology solving some of these challenges? Well, firstly, it provides consistency and scale. So a point that I think was addressed earlier is it's really critical that how you engage with young people is both meaningful and consistent. And often what we see among employers is that there are pockets of great activity that happen, maybe in terms of work experience programs or volunteers going into schools and colleges. But what technology provides is a way to be able to offer that in a consistent and measurable way. It also allows you to personalise the candidate experience. So what I mean by that is you're engaging with young people in a way that they're accustomed to. So again, thinking about smartphone usage, it also allows them to be able to a certain extent, to be able to control that relationship and feel like they have ownership over how that journey with their prospective employer shapes. Data and insight is obviously, a glaringly obvious one, but I often talk to employers who say, we struggle to measure the ROI for the attraction work that we do via careers fairs or whatever it may be. We struggle to know where talent and diverse talent is dropping out during our recruitment journey, or perhaps we struggle to understand actually how young people are thinking and feeling when they move through that experience with a prospective employer. So by getting real-time feedback and engaging in a digital way, we're able to create that level of insight and that level of data to be able to show which channels are working and which ones need to be addressed. And finally, back to my point about being able to do more with less, it can contribute to really essentially an extra pair of hands on deck in terms of being able to automate some of the process and yet still provide a very personalised experience for young people. So what are we actually doing at MyKindaFuture, and how are we putting this into context? So we've been working with a number of key partners within this particular space, starting with Scanscale, but then branching out to work with Arcadis, Atkins, and soon to be RICS. And the purpose really is to create a learning and engagement platform that provides a way to reach, inspire, recruit, and ultimately retain diverse talent. It's built on two key components. One is this notion of being able to share content that is important to you as an employer. So all employers and industries within this room will have a key set of values and principles which they need to impart to their future talent, and they're very proud of, and rightly so. But we also mix that with a range of skills modules that relate specifically to the skills that young people need to be able to demonstrate when they join your organisation. So it could be anything from time management, email etiquette, managing your own career effectively, right the way through to mental health in the workplace. The second key component, and one that I'm particularly passionate about, is this notion of peer-to-peer insight via digital mentoring. So this is where we connect up your future and prospective talent with your existing talent. And it's incredibly powerful. Not only does it provide a positively honest insight into the organisation, but it allows young people and talent to be able to start to build relationships with the organisation and to get a better sense of what life is like within the business. And I think it's really important that young people can recognise and see young people that they can relate to within a business far more than perhaps hearing from me or the recruitment team. So just wanted to underpin everything I've said with a very quick Arcadis case study. So we've been working with Arcadis for a number of years, and when we first engaged them, they were very keen to shift the dial on diversity, unsurprisingly. They also recognised that there were certain pinch points during the recruitment process where young talent were struggling and falling short. So what we did was we underpinned and mapped their recruitment process to Connector, and we provided a mix of skills modules throughout that journey for a young person. We also then provided a second round of content that went from that pre-boarding phase, from offer through to start date, to really cement that relationship and improve that speed to value, so getting future talent really ready for that experience with Arcadis. So just to bring this to life as a real life example for me, I remember actually sitting a online assessment for a prospective employer, and being slightly dyslexic, I was in a bit of a panic about doing this online assessment as it was. And the first question was a golf question, and it said the frost hole. And I'd spent ages thinking, well, why are we playing golf if there's frost? And then I thought to myself, well, I don't play golf anyway. And I realised actually I completely misread the question. But I suppose the point of the message is, had there been some skills and some content available to me that helps prepped me for that experience, or told me where I could go if I needed some reassurance or some extra support, then I think for me personally that would have been invaluable. Apologies for the golf reference there, whether or not you like golf or not. But in Arcadis' example, this I think is really, really powerful. So unsurprisingly, the video interview support was a really key topic that was adopted and studied by the majority of talent who went through that journey. And actually, when we mapped that to the recruitment process, we found that that was one of the key pinch points for diverse talent going through that journey. So there are lots of misconceptions around video interviews, and you know, it could be due to the lack of feedback or you know, Chinese whispers, but it is certainly a pinch point among a number of employers. So by being able to provide skills and build confidence among young people prior to that taking place, we actually got a really strong conversion at that stage of the journey. So it was actually about, you know, more broadly improving the candidate experience and providing diverse talent with a really great experience into the organisation, but critically supporting them at each stage of that journey. And I think that is what we certainly need to do if we're talking about inspiring the next generation into industry. So more broadly, what have we achieved via Connector? Glassdoor ratings have improved among employers. We get a really good level of completion. Dropout rates are decreasing during the recruitment process, but also the critical pre-boarding window. We're looking at returner programs and trying to help support talent back into the organisation and make them feel valued. But critically, and most importantly for me personally and for us as an organisation, is that we now see how Connector and digital engagement is able to support a diverse mix of talent and enable them to thrive and to set them up for success once they're in industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from Theo, who is this next generation of talent.
Good afternoon, my name's Theodore Vasiloiu, and I'm part of the London Design and Engineering UTC, from which you've heard from Janice and Tolu earlier as part of their panel with Stephen from CITB. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my journey at the UTC, my career choices that I've had to go through, and also what I think you as employers should know about us as your future workforce. So this is actually a picture of East London, actually, and this is what East London looked like a few years ago, actually, before the construction of our school. And actually, this circle here is actually where we've built an entirely new education provider right opposite near London City Airport. And post 2016, we've been able to launch this brand new school who focuses on design and engineering as our main specialisms. But we also use a variety of technologies, and we also do focus on the academic subjects alongside our vocational subjects. And so the whole aim of this sort of new way of learning is to enable us, the workforce, to be able to go into your companies with both the technical know-how, the actual academic skills, but also the business acumen that we need to succeed in your companies. These are just some of the industry links which we have as part of our school. So employer engagement is at the very core of what we do. We do fantastic work with our main sponsors, which are Costain, Tideway, Fujitsu, Skanska, and many more which I haven't listed on here. But the whole point of the employer engagement is that we're able to form connections with these employers before we get to the application stage. Because if I've spoken to you as a hiring manager before I've even got to that application stage, by the time I get there, you have already formed a relationship with myself, know my skills, and know that I have what it takes to succeed in your company. As part at the LDE UTC, so we have a pledge which has been set out by the actual school that everyone in a year 13 cohort will either leave the school with a higher education position, a position in a job, in employment, or in an apprenticeship. And I'm pleased to say that our first cohort who left the school last year, 100% of people, so this pledge was fulfilled. So we've had the whole year 13 cohort go even into university, a job, or a recognised apprenticeship. Now, for my personal journey, this is what it looks like, essentially, probably a CV on a slide. It started in 2016, so I joined the school from the very beginning, where we actually started as a porter cabin, our school actually, so it wasn't until January this year where we had our fully complete building. So that picture there from the BBC is actually where I went on live to talk about the new T levels, which obviously, as construction companies, you should know that they're the technical equivalent of A levels at the moment and are extremely important in bringing you qualified workforces to your companies in the very near future. And from the actual school, I've developed multiple skills, which I've been lucky enough to have done with the help of the employers. Here is at the Bet Show at the ExCeL London, where we've partnered with Promethean to talk about all the 3D modelling and stuff that we've done using their boards. As Johnny was actually saying, I've actually set up my own business, so I was the managing director of a business in that middle picture there. We used augmented reality to create new sustainable gift packaging. And also, as was said briefly earlier, with my passion for biomedical engineering, I've been able to work with the Blizzard Institute, which is part of Queen Mary University of London, to be able to use one of only 2 bioprinters in the UK to actually produce artificial heart valves, which then also brings all of our sectors together in terms of the design and engineering process, because it really does overlap. One thing I do want to talk about is the employer projects that we do at our school. So we do something known as the Extended Project Qualification, which you might have heard of, the EPQ. And we do have a lot of students who have focused on doing a design EPQ, so basically we had one student do a tideway project where they looked at the new super sewer. And basically what Johnny was saying about the research aspect is really important, because we need to know about your companies before we come into them. We need to be fully informed, but we also need to have some sort of knowledge about how we produce research, because as you've seen with all the statistics today, it's incredibly important in understanding our workplaces. I just want to show you a quick trailer from my EPQ project, which actually looked into the NHS, to show you that we as students are trying to get involved with your workforces. So mine will probably be the NHS, but we are trying to look into what our workplaces look like for us to join as your workforce. So I just want to show you that real quickly if it works. Can we get the sound? Is the sound up? Tech school, they say. I think. Sorry. I don't know if anyone's... there we go.
The problem is across the system, and it's been going on for several years. This crisis is nothing new. This crisis has been there year on, year out. It gets worse.
How does that affect all of you morale day to day when nothing seems to be changing or getting better?
It's so difficult when you have patient after patient coming in saying, I was sat in A&E for 7 hours, I didn't get seen, so I've come back to you again. And, your heart sinks a little bit, because you just think, wow, you really needed that further care, and you weren't able to get it. And it's so hard, because I love the NHS, I'm so passionate about it, and I want to make sure all my patients get the best care that they can get.
We can take back control of millions of pounds that we currently give to the EU. We hand over something like £350 million every week.
Can you guarantee that's going to go to the NHS?
No, I can't, and I would never have made that claim.
We vote Leave on June the 23rd, we can take back control of £350 million.
Antibiotics, unlike other drugs, will develop resistance the more they're used. the response has to be with national governments across the world.
Regularly, I'm meant to do a 13-hour shift and I'll stay 15 or 16 hours, and I'll do that because I love my patients.
So that was just the trailer for my EPQ, and actually I'm in the process. Thank you. It's titled Hypertension. I strategically named it Hypertension based on what I think the NHS is in a state at the moment. I'm actually in the process of writing to Number 10 to hopefully arrange an interview with Theresa May, which is out of this world to be able to even think about that. The whole point of it was to show you that we, as your future workforce, are completely dedicated to jumping into your workplaces by jumping on that career ladder, by putting ourselves out there to create things which have never been done before. We are adapting. We're using technology. We are using different ways of working to be able to effectively jump on that career ladder. And I'm sure that is precisely what you're looking for from us, which is what takes me on to what is important when looking for a career for us. Because essentially, you're looking for us to join your corporations, but it's important for you to know what we want to see when applying for a job. I spoke with colleagues at school, and I came up with the top 5 things that we'd like to look for in your company if we were to apply. And the first one we came up with, one of the most important, is actually, do the company's values align with yours? Because we've all arrived in a day and age now where sustainable business practices are practically front and center. For example, in terms of getting your company up there into the top company. And actually Lyft, which is the equivalent of Uber, I believe, in the States, this is just some of their company values, which I thought was quite significant because their employees abide by the values which Lyft sets. And actually, if your company is stating that we are going to put these things in place to ensure that you are happy in the place that you work, ensure that productivity increases, you're more likely to go and work there. Particularly with sustainability now, we now have arrived on the topic of climate change and a lot of difficulties with, we saw the London protests a few weeks ago, let's not talk about that, but it's incredibly important, sustainability, to us as the new generation, because essentially they're saying that we are trying to fix the problems caused by older generations, because obviously we've got climate change, we've got global warming, and part of that is actually getting business to abide by sustainable practices, which essentially reduces the workload that we have to then put up with when we become your new workforces. And something that's been talked about actually quite a lot today, is there career progression in the role that you're going to? Because we are a generation, particularly I can speak on behalf of the most people in our school, we don't want to go into a job and be stuck in a state where you have no promotion for 10 years. If we're coming out of our education qualified enough to be able to progress to that top level, what's stopping us? And the problem is that the companies are stopping us from progressing further. It's because that we're lucky enough at our school to be able to have these opportunities to progress and do our own projects. But I feel as if that some employees feel as if they aren't able to go to their managers and say, listen, this is where I want to get to in 5 years' time. Are you going to help me to be able to do that? And they're stuck at the analyst level, nothing wrong with being there. But a lot of people do want to get to being a partner in the company. So if they've got the skills, as they've come out, for example, from our college with the skills to do so, why wouldn't you let them get to the top? Transferable skills, particularly because it's been such an important, as we were saying earlier, into getting a job without having any specific background in that actual role. And obviously you wouldn't be able to do that until you got into that role. So if you had transferable skills, it would be able to show that you are qualified for the job, even if you do not have any direct work experience in that field. Particularly for us as students, it's incredibly hard to find work experience with companies nowadays. You'd think that because there's such an increase with wanting participation in outreach programs, that you'd be able to find more work experience opportunities. But the problem is that we found as students is that there's no centralized area to be able to find work experience for your industries. And whilst it might be there, it's not being marketed effectively. So if there was to be a proposition to be able to put this out to students and show, you'd be able to then form a connection with that student, which could eventually turn into be your future worker. And one point I'd like to make actually is that there's a lot of students that come into sixth form, so where I'm at the moment, in year 12, having no prior work experience, and they get to their UCAS applications, and their personal statements aren't even a quarter full because they haven't had those experiences. And so, universities, they like to see a progression from about year 10 pre-GCSE. They want to see experiences that you've had over a period of time. They don't want to see just one week placement instead of when they could have a student that's had a 3-year ongoing program with a company. And so if you were to introduce something from around the ages of pre-GCSE, so I'd say about year 10, 14 years old, you then carry that on to the process of where they're looking to go into an apprenticeship, a job, or university, and then they will have that to put on their personal statement and equip them to be part of your companies. Tech skills, that's something that we're very big on at our school. The picture on the left is actually part of our virtual reality computer lab. Basically, we have setups with 2 computer screens and HTC Vive VR headsets, if you're aware of the technology. In the middle picture, we've got Lord Baker, who is actually the gentleman to actually set up the UTC, so the concept of university technical colleges. And the reason why I say particularly within the construction industry, if you see on the right, we have a lot of opportunities now there's a wide scope for being able to use VR, particularly in engineering, construction. You're able to now use technologies which weren't possible even 5 years ago. And that's saying something because the industry is moving fast. We're moving fast, and you need to keep up with it, essentially, because what's possible now could have been possible even 6 months ago. So there needs to be that ongoing communication between the younger generations and the older ones, and try and bridge that gap together. So actually, this is actually work that I did. So I've actually studied planning and designing the built environment as part of a City and Guilds technical qualification. And this is work that we were doing at 14 years old. So if anyone's saying that there's a skills shortage, I can assure you that there isn't. We are filling this gap because we were doing foundation drawings at 14 years old. And to be able to have that wide skill set which we've attained from these T levels and these technical qualifications, combined with the new technology that we're experiencing, means that you have an academic and a technical individual. And it's all about bridging the gap between the academic provision and technical provision, which is why the T levels have been formed. Will you be challenged in a positive way in your job? So our school, we had actually it was a project set up with the Institute of Civil Engineers, and we were asked, so we have these robots, little robots called Neo, and they're about a £6,000 humanoid robot. We have the older brother or sister called Pepper, she's about double the price. But we had the challenge set, can we make a humanoid robot ski, like physically ski on a mountain? And so we were set this challenge, and it went through, we'd done the CAD/CAM manufacturing processes, we were in the workshop, we were building the skis for the robot to be able to actually ski on an actual mountain. And without the laser cutters, without the BIM program, the CAD/CAM programming, without the skill set of, like, for example, aerodynamics and how it worked, we wouldn't have been able to reach Italy and actually have a robot actually ski down a physical mountain. And that goes to show you that the possibilities are endless when you have a challenge set by your employer which positively encourages your workforce to better themselves, which increases productivity in the process.
Theo, have you got much more to go?
Yeah, no, I'm finishing now. That's just, that's just some other things that came up. Careers advice, particularly mental health support, is a big one at the moment. We do have mental health champions at school. Yeah, I mean, respect is the biggest, and communication. I feel like we, being such a new school, obviously communication was an issue, but having a big corporation, communication decreases in productivity, in how communication works across the corporation. So build on your communication, talk to the people involved at the top, talk to your younger generations as well, and form that connection from early on. Yeah. That's just it. Thanks to sites like Glassdoor now, where you have reviews of your companies, it really is trying to make sure that your workforce is happy with what they do at work, and that could be down to inflexible work schedules, or you don't foster a creative and fun culture. So ensuring that the workplace is fun, productive, flexible, like we were saying earlier, ensures that your workforce is going to stick with you and be there for the future. So I'd like to thank you for listening. There's my Twitter if you do want to get in touch, and if you do want to come and visit us down near London City Airport, do get in touch because we'll be happy to accommodate. So thank you.
Thanks, Theo. I know we're overrunning. I'm ever so sorry, Bryony, but I didn't want to cut off that brilliant example of an inspirational future generation, future employee for all of us. We are overrunning, but if somebody's got a killer question, absolutely burning to ask, have to ask that question. So do we need to get a microphone to that lady? Yeah.
Okay, this might be a bit of a long one. Okay, hi, I'm Amy. I work at Action Sustainability as an apprentice, digital marketing apprentice. And my questions are kind of about, because I did uni before I went to an apprenticeship twice, actually. I dropped out twice because it was affecting my mental health and well-being, really. And it's sort of about, you're talking about unis being a really highly selective process and your process being also really highly selective. Do you think that's partially because, like, this kid here, wow, amazing. I saw your documentary, I studied film, amazing, by the way. You're out here doing it. Do you think that apprenticeships and things like this, where you get hands-on experience, which a lot of young people are lacking, do you think that university is always the best option?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If all of you would like to have a go at answering that.
So I'll go quickly and I'll be brief. Absolutely not. We need to raise the status of all school leaver prospects. I, as I said in my talk, don't think that 50% of kids should go to university. I think we should build the right, it's horses for courses, and we should be building the right schemes for the right students and absolutely raising the status of apprenticeships and vocational learning. There should be no stigma around it. In the UK, we're really hung up on university. Just one small thought on that. In a school, you've got 200, 250 people who've all been to university, so it's a very, very easy conversation to have with your kids to say, oh, think about university. Very few of those people have worked in construction. Very few of those people have started a business. So it's a lot harder to have those conversations. So we need to think about creating spaces for those role models, and for those career prospects.
Really, that depends on the school and the background, though.
Schools, you take them as they come. So there's a huge range of schools in the UK. Some absolutely outstanding schools and children who go to schools that probably don't serve their needs as well as they could. But we have to work with the system and work with the schools and the teachers that we've got and raise the status of all career prospects, I think.
Thank you.
I think just super quickly, it's about our responsibility is to help young people understand and discover what their likes and interests are and how that can translate into a career, and then showing them all the ways that that's possible via all the different routes that are available, and I think that's our responsibility.
Yeah. And Theo, if you've got
just to briefly add, I'm actually incredibly jealous of apprenticeships. There's not a way of becoming something, well, there's not many medical apprenticeships, so in terms of studying medicine at university, I still have to go down the traditional route, so I'm actually incredibly jealous in that sense that you come out debt-free after an apprenticeship and have a job and have it all paid for and everything. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity, something that we market hugely at our school. Apprenticeships, actually, the majority of that 100% actually was apprenticeships. And I do think that at the moment apprenticeships are booming. I think there's more of a focus on them now than university, because at the end of the day, you're stressing about getting into university to decide on who you're going to pay 10 grand a year to, which seems quite contradictory, but definitely apprenticeships I definitely think is the way forward.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much. Now we're 10 minutes over, which means we've only got 10 minutes for coffee. So can we come back into this room? But please thank our speakers.